So I know it's come up quite a bit over the last couple of days, but I'm actually really excited to talk to you about big data. The question that I'm going to hopefully answer a little bit for you is, what is big data? It's a term that's used a lot. It's misunderstood, but there is a lot to be very excited about. Today I work for a company that many of us in Singapore know, SingTel, and I'm charged with actually connecting up SingTel's 470 million customers around Asia with the big ad platforms, leading ad platforms today from Amobi, and obviously the big data sets and the insights that we have from all of those customers. So let me take you through that. So what is big data? Well, big data, Sir Martin Sorrell had a very eloquent way of positioning and defining big data. Wikipedia has their own view, but realistically, when it gets so big and you've got so much data that's being managed and curated, that you need new types of systems to manage that data. And so lots of companies have started building out systems and services for big data to manage these massive loads of bytes that are going through the networks today. If we think about sort of volumes, so 90% of all data globally has actually been generated, has actually been generated over the last sort of 2 years. And the different types of data is you have structured data. So if we take 10% of the data, structured data being data that sits inside databases that's being managed by systems. And you have unstructured data, which are things like what you're doing right now. So posting to Twitter, Facebook posts, watching a video, whether it's uploading or downloading an image, whether it's GPS navigation information that's being streamed to the cloud, whether it's digital radio, is also data that's being managed across a network, and there's a lot of it today. So how big is data? It's really, really big today. So in any one day, there's a new word I learned actually as I was putting this together, but it was 2.5 quintillion bytes of data. And to give you an idea of how big that is, it's around about 33 million years of HD video if you just sat down and could stand watching it for that long. It's about 410 billion 64 gigabyte iPhones all fully loaded. That's actually how much data is streaming across the world today and around the world. Netflix today in the US, out of all data consumption, generates around about 30, or consumes about 30% of all bandwidth in the US today. So the whole thing is, people said many years ago, how big is big data going to get? How big do the pipes have to be to actually support all the data usage? And what they've found is, over time, the bigger the pipes get, the more we find to fill those pipes. And so the exciting thing is really trying to understand then underneath, with all these habits and all this consumption that's going on today, how do you take those insights and actually potentially deliver better and more relevant things to the consumers? So IBM have been doing some really interesting research, and they've had a real impact on people's lives and also on business today. So sort of away from our advertising business for a second, but the healthcare industry, they've actually seen a 20% decrease in mortality rates just by using and looking at big data. You've got telcos that they've seen 92% decrease in processing times, and a big impact on utilities. I mean, it's a 99% improvement. You've got to think, what the hell were they doing before that? But something that comes closer to us within the advertising industry, we look at the productivity increases that companies are expecting to see this year. And the retail industry, just from sales alone, just by using data, are seeing increases around about $9.6 billion. The big data industry today is going to grow from something like around about $3 to $4 billion globally to about $16 billion in the next 2 or 3 years. Just the systems and services to manage data, not including the dollars that are actually being transacted through it. So something else that we know the purchase funnel for many of us today is nonlinear. It's a mess. Forrester had a pretty good go at trying to explain it. No one really understood what they were trying to explain though. McKinsey have actually had a really good go at trying to explain it, but you could look at their diagram and make an assumption that it could end in a hurricane. from the way that they've put it. And it is broken today. And so how do you take a broken and a very, very complex purchase funnel and try and understand it? And the way you're going to do it is through data. So where's the gold for all of us? It's a big question. I mean, I've been at SingTel now for about 6 months. And, you know, I have great days. Many people have actually asked me, how's it been over the last 6 months working for a big operator? And I have, like any other business, I have great days where we've got great opportunity, huge potential looking at, you know, data sets of 470 million customers. Not every customer. It took me a long time to do that. But the opportunity to go and use that data and actually eventually and finally deliver a relevant ad to an actual consumer is where the excitement is. But at the end of the day, it's where is the gold? So we know a couple of things. One, we definitely know that big data, and particularly when it relates to mobile for us in the industry, is going to create billion-dollar businesses. It's a known fact, and companies are planning for it, and there are already very big businesses that have been built around data. The second thing we know, and I definitely feel this working for a big operator, is that it sort of feels like the days of the gold rush. You know, I feel like SingTel owns a big piece of land, and they've definitely been out in the advertising space building and selling sort of the picks and the shovels and trying to design the next pair of Levi jeans for its customers. But it hasn't really gone deep after the gold. But it is really hard. Big data, there's a lot of dirt out there, a lot of mess, but the nuggets are there. And being able to take those nuggets and actually see those nuggets within the industry is what we're trying to do. Big challenge though is once you have that gold, a big piece that's missing in the advertising industry today is someone that can take all the gold and understand here's the big data sets. We take the analysis, you've got the data scientists that are sitting there telling you that's the nugget that you have to take and use. But the companies that can then transpose that information and that analysis into something that's tangible and a communication to an actual consumer, that's missing today. It's a real lack of talent globally around that next piece. A lot of investment's actually gone into the big data scientists. If you're in Silicon Valley today, and actually, if I had to choose an industry for my sons, it'd most probably be to become a data scientist. They're sort of, I suppose, the next dentists of our digital age. But the layer of actually taking all the information and communicating it is sorely lacking in this industry. So this is where we're sort of headed. We know that the demand is searching for smart digital advertising. The great thing though is marketing doesn't change, it never does. Our ability to connect to the right consumer at the right time, but now in the right place as well, hasn't changed. But our ability to actually do it, particularly with mobile, is the first time that it's being realised. And we're trying some of those things at the moment through the Amobi systems in Australia and seeing some huge successes, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the real objective is how do we go and build an ecosystem around people? I've been in the digital industry now been advertising for about 20 years. I've been in the digital industry for about 12. And I think the digital industry is the only other industry besides the drug industry that actually uses the word users for its customers. But I think now we're trying to get to a place where we're actually talking about people. And I think we're talking about people because we can actually really talk to a person now rather than talk to a presumed set of demographics or a presumed set of behaviours. We can really start talking to individuals, obviously with the right permissions, which is, I'm sure, sitting on many of your minds about how we use that data. Our view of sort of how we see the world going forward is that whether or not companies have the appetite to really become customer-centric, like really customer-centric, really thinking about the consumer, really thinking about their customers in a very different way than they are today. So this diagram sort of depicts a consumer with lots of different data sets that or insights that you can get about a consumer or about one of your customers. And forgetting sort of what those layers are, there's lots of different layers and you can actually get them from lots of different places. There's a lot of third parties that have data, there's insights. I mean, realistically, we know when someone calls their hairdresser today. We know if someone, we know the groups of people that call, home delivery pizza on Friday nights. Whether or not we use that information, whether or not we have permission to use that information is another question. But the ecosystem in the future is we have, and even what we're doing today is we have a lot of big data, we have the analytics layer, and the ability to start building out audience clusters. And we've started doing this for Optus through the Amobi platforms. So what we've been doing for Optus is on the Optus properties, for the first time, we're actually able to look at a lot of the operator data, and we're able to see, particularly for retention, how many months are left on someone's contract and what services they subscribe to. And we can actually serve up an ad to someone that is within a month of their contract finishing with an offer that basically offers them the next upgrade or to continue their contract. We've been able to then track that person through with the Amobi system. So we've been able to track that person through and actually see if they've looked at any of the offers for recontracting. But then additional to that, we've been able to see if that person actually goes through and recontracts, not only online, but because their mobile number is a unique identifier, we've also been able to see if they've recontracted offline. So now we're correlating, tracking, and reporting all the way through the customer funnel, and Optus is now actually delivering a better service to their own customers. We haven't opened this up yet to third-party customers, but we have a lot of companies that are talking to us about doing some interesting work. But big questions come up in the future, particularly around big data. So who owns the data? Who's adding value? Like, what's the value worth? What's each data point worth? What are the economics around data? What ends up being data that is owned by, say, Optus or SingTel? What's a shared data point when you're actually building out multiple audience clusters of different companies and brands? And which are the data points that are owned by those particular companies? Whether it's an agency, whether it's a brand, whether it's an operator like SingTel. So one of the examples, so I gave you one from Optus. Another example that we've been engaged with one of the banks in Australia. They came to us with a problem and they said, Australia is a 9 to 5 society, except for Thursday nights when we know there's late night shopping, unlike Singapore. And we know that if you're going to buy a car in Australia, you tend to do it on the weekend if you're working in the city. And the problem for the banks in Australia is the banks aren't open on the weekend. So you can't get approval on the weekend when you go and buy a car. And so their challenge is on the weekends, they're actually competing with, the car loans that you get at the car showroom as opposed to the other banks. So they've come to us and said, look, are you able to tell us for our customers? So can you help us connect to our customers directly? And can you tell us if our customers are starting to increase their interest around cars? So their surfing habits changing and they're starting to look at new car sites, used car sites. But then can you tell us if they've actually called the car showroom? Right, so we know roughly where that car showroom might be. And then the interesting thing is that the bank then can actually send that person a message saying, if you're thinking about buying a car and you're thinking about going on the weekend, would you like pre-approval? We've actually created an app for you, so if you're shopping for a car, you can compare car loans and see how that compares to the loans that are at the car showroom. But the other thing is when the person actually goes to the car showroom, we can then also send a reminder to that person from the bank that says, not from us, but from the bank that actually says, hey, you're one of our customers, you're a loyal customer, we're on this journey with you today. So if you're thinking about buying a car on the weekend and you're at the car showroom, don't forget there's an app that you can use. And so the big difference that we're seeing in the way advertising is today and the way advertising is for us in the future is actually delivering advertising much more like a service than it is for, hey, I've got a banner ad to sell you or I've got a piece of inventory to sell you. And so for us as an operator, we're always looking at ways of scaling the business, and delivering a service is much more important to us than just selling ads. So if we know someone has moved house and we know they like Italian food and we know that they like connections to, they want to find out who the local plumber is, we're able to share that information with that person and give them real value and relevant information as opposed to just advertising. The medium may be advertising, but the message is very, very different, very, very powerful when you do that. So some real stuff rather than the future. We've been running some tests in Australia already. And the reason why we do this is because, number one, we have Optus in Australia to do this with, but also we have a fairly large panel that we use in every market to test new products and services. So this is all opt-in information. This is information that's been collected over many months, because location data is very, very powerful, but what we're finding even more powerful is patterns of data. So patterns and paths. So for example, we know that Simon, because of his patterns and where he spends his time, we roughly know where home is and we roughly know where his work is. But we also had Simon validate that for us as well. So it was confirmed. We also know that on Wednesday nights and Friday nights, he tends to go into the city and he takes a different route on Wednesdays and Fridays. So on Fridays, he actually drives straight from work into the city. And on Wednesday, he actually leaves from home. So the big difference here is there's a great opportunity to talk to Simon before he leaves home. So for the petrol companies, can we influence where he actually goes to? Can we influence which brands he's loyal to? Or what is his level of loyalty to that brand? And obviously different offers around lunchtime, around home delivery, or entertainment offers. But we can do it not when the person's there, because usually a lot of decisions are made when you arrive in a location, but we can actually do it before they go. So lastly, this is just another example of what we've done. We did a bit of a study because we thought petrol's quite interesting. We had a lot of data about the patterns of people driving around the city, and we obviously found that we had sort of short distance drivers and we had very long distance drivers. And what we found was that, obviously a heavy driver that covered a lot of the Sydney area as part of his job had a high interest in petrol stations and convenience stores at petrol stations, and obviously the price of petrol. So the first thing we tried to do is find out and validate the likelihood of them accepting an offer. And we found out that obviously heavy users are 3 times more likely to redeem petrol offers compared to sort of small area customers. But even more interestingly, what we found out is that we started to identify, because of the patterns, who was brand loyal. So who was actually always going to the same petrol stations? And could we actually change their patterns? Could we convince someone to change to a different petrol station offering a similar sort of offer? And what we found was something really interesting. I'll skip through this, but what we found was that 67% of all petrol buyers in the area or within the panel that we worked with, the 67% of them were actually switchers. They weren't that brand loyal. The real brand loyals was 11% for Shell, 17% and 5% for Exxon and for Caltex. And so the question comes up then, particularly for the oil companies, where you actually go and invest your money. So do you invest your money on the real brand loyals that no matter what you offer them, even if you get a 10% offer or $5 off petrol or $10 off petrol, do you actually focus your efforts on the people that are not going to switch? They may switch at a certain level, but you could test those hypotheses. And then where would you actually focus your funds on around the 67% and try and work through those? So it's quite interesting. And so given the fact that, what we're trying to do of trying to understand patterns and the effects that they can actually have on the brands, and the way that you can actually have a conversation with that consumer becomes really powerful. So look, to wrap up, that's all for now. But we're excited about this space. I hope I didn't make big data sound too daunting. I hope I gave you some insights. But definitely getting it right, you can do amazing things. But the thing to remember, and that we particularly working across the Asian markets, there's a lot of different policies and requirements that you have for every single country. And we're having to work through all of those privacy concerns and how we actually offer customers at the end of the day for using the data and leveraging the data real value back. Because what we've found is when you offer a consumer real value, they're very, very happy to accept offers and information from you. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Grant Watts.